Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our valve cover gaskets. Now replacing the valve cover gaskets overall isn't going to be a very hard job, but there is another gasket you're going to need, and that's for your upper intake, so make sure you have the pair. Aside from that, when you do the valve cover gaskets, you're also going to want to make sure that you do an oil change, so make sure you have the proper oil and filter. Let's get started. Come right over to the negative battery terminal. You have two wires on this that lead right to the strut tower right here. We're going to go ahead and remove the 15mm nut that holds the first wire on, pull it off, and then we'll go ahead and do the same exact thing to the second wire. Remove that wire, inspect both sides, set it aside. Remove that wire, inspect it as well, set both wires aside so they're making no contact with the body of the vehicle. Okay, so now we're going to want to safely raise and support the front of the vehicle just so the wheel's up off the ground. After that, remove all of your 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now, if you're doing this on a lift, it really only makes sense to go ahead and remove the passenger side wheel at the same time. That way there, when you bring this back down closer to the ground, you can bring it extra close so we can have more access from the top. Now with the wheel out of the way, let's go ahead and remove this plastic trim panel right here. You're going to find two 10mm headed bolts, one here and one right there. Aside from that, you should have a push clip located in this area. Go ahead and remove that, and then both of the bolts. Hold that shield. Remove it from the vehicle. Now we're just going to go ahead and turn this clockwise. That's going to release the tension, and we can grab the belt and start pulling it off of the AC compressor. Once it's off of there, carefully release tension, being very careful not to damage your sensor at all. And then we can remove the belt. Okay, so it's up and over the alternator up there. I can pull it down. Now at this point, you're going to want to inspect your serpentine belt. Make sure it's not torn or worn or damaged in any way. If it is, obviously, it's a great time to go ahead and replace it. This one looks fine, so I'll set it aside. Okay, so now the next thing that we're going to start doing is taking all this apart up here so we can start removing the valve covers and everything. Before we do that, you want to make sure you blow off any debris that might be on top of the engine. You don't want any of that making its way into the engine because, of course, that can cause engine issues. Now at this point, let's start over on the driver's side of the engine. We're going to start disconnecting some of the electrical connectors over here. For this one, just go ahead and grab on the center tab where my index finger is, squeeze it, and lift this up and off. Every time you remove any electrical connector, just give it a quick inspection. If you see any funny colors, it's probably corrosion and it would need to be dealt with. This looks fine, so we'll continue on checking all of them as we go. This has a red locking tab. You're just going to slide that so it's in the unlocked position. After that, squeeze the tab, pull it off. Another red tab. Squeeze the center. With all that disconnected, let's continue on to starting to remove the top of the air filter box. Now for this, you're going to find two locking clips. There's one right here. And then there should be one located on this side, but ours is missing. Go ahead and pop that off, the same as you did the first. After that, we're going to come right here to the breather hose. Go ahead and grab onto that, pull it off. Give it a quick squeeze, make sure it's soft and pliable and it's not damaged. Set that aside. After that, we're going to follow this tube to where it connects onto the throttle body. Use an 8mm or a flathead screwdriver and remove that clamp right there. We're just going to loosen it up just enough. Now we can grab onto this, slide it off of the throttle body, and remove this area from the vehicle. Once you've done that, go ahead and grab onto the air filter, inspect it, set it aside. Let's continue on the driver's side of this intake here. We're going to start removing some hoses. We'll get this one off of here. Every hose that you remove, just give it a quick squeeze, inspect it. This one right here, slide that off. Now all the way in the back there, you're going to find another hose. Go ahead and grab onto that, slide it off as well. Give that one a squeeze. Okay. Next, we're going to start removing the EGR tube. Up along the top here, you're going to find two 8mm headed bolts, one here, one a little bit further back. Once we get those loose, you're going to follow this EGR tube all the way to where it connects onto the EGR right down here. If you just pull these hoses out of the way, you can see where it connects on. We're going to remove both of those bolts as well, and then get this entire tube right out of here. Keep in mind, it's a good idea to have a gasket to replace right at the EGR. There's that one. Now at this point, this can flex around a little bit, but this tube actually goes quite a bit right into the intake here. So like I said, just follow it down there and disconnect that area too. Now we're gonna go ahead and follow that tube down to where it connects onto the EGR valve. You can either take out the two bolts that hold the EGR tube to the EGR, which of course you'd want to replace the gasket at the same time. Or if you had an issue trying to get out these bolts, because this one on the back side's a little bit harder to get to, you could also just disconnect the EGR valve electrical connector and then take out the two bolts that hold the entire EGR valve to the engine. Whichever way you want to do it, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the EGR valve and remove it from the engine. To do that, I'm just going to come right inside here, up along the top. I can grab with my thumb, squeeze the tab, and pull it off. Set that aside. Now we're going to find the two bolts that hold the EGR to the engine. Let's use a 10mm to start removing these. Now let's try to get that second bolt. That's going to be located right up in the corner here, basically just directly across from that other one that we could very easily see. Let's see if I can get this on here. Grab that bolt out of there. Let's go ahead and grab onto that gasket. Now we can grab the EGR. You can see that tube goes very deep into the intake here. That's why we had to remove this. Now you can either just remove this from the vehicle or just set it aside. I'm just going to set it aside for now. Now we're going to come right up here to this bracket. We can start removing that by coming up top. You're going to find a 10mm headed nut. Go ahead and loosen that. Follow that bracket down to its next connection point. We'll use a 13mm. With that nice and loose, go ahead and move that bracket out of the way. At this point, you can leave this right here. Now let's come over to the passenger side of this intake. You're going to find two electrical connectors that we need to disconnect. There's one that leads to this area, and then the exact same thing that's on that area right there. To remove these, once again, we have the red locking tab. Pull that down, squeeze the center point, pop it off. All right, that one's off of there. Those look good. Okay, so now what we need to do is get right behind this intake area here. Looking at the back, you're going to be able to find where the heater core hoses come through the body of the vehicle, and then they're supposed to lead towards the engine. When you find the area where the heater core hoses are, just go ahead and reach your hand right along the back side of the engine, and you should be able to find a 13mm headed bolt. Essentially, that bolt is going to hold a bracket to the back side of the intake, so we need to remove that, and then do the exact same thing for the passenger side. There's another bolt over there. To access this one, I'm going to come right in through the side. I'll find my bolt. Okay. Go ahead and turn that counterclockwise to fully remove it. There's that one. Once you have that one out, continue over on the passenger side, do the exact same thing. This bolt is going to be fairly easy to get to, essentially right along this area here, right in the back. So you can see where you have this tube right here. Just feel right in this area. We're going to find that 13 again. We'll use our 13mm socket to remove this bolt as well. There it is. This thing's pretty much ready to come off, but we just need to remove the 7 10mm headed bolts that hold it down. Now when I do this, I'm going to start from one side and make my way all the way to the other. These bolts are essentially just going to come loose, but they only come up so far. Go ahead and leave them in there and continue doing the same to the rest. Now let's carefully grab onto this. We're going to lift it up and away from the vehicle. Just keep in mind, if there's any dirt or debris in this area, it might potentially fall into the engine, so just be very careful. Now all these ports that you can see down along here lead directly into the engine. It's very important to make sure nothing falls inside of any of these holes. If you feel as though something did, you need to try to get it out of there, especially if it's a bolt or something like that. To help avoid that, I'm just going to go ahead and cover those holes with something. This is just going to make sure that nothing can fall inside while I continue. Let's start disconnecting the wiring for it. We'll start right here with this red locking tab. Go ahead and pull that away, squeeze on the center, remove the wiring. Squeeze this. If your locking clip came completely out, just go ahead and slide that tab right underneath. And put it up into position, get it ready. Let's move along to this area here. For this, there's going to be 2 squeeze tabs. There's one right here, one where my index finger is. Go ahead and squeeze those, pop this cover off of there. Underneath that area, you're going to find this nut. Let's go ahead and remove that. Use our 13 on this. Remove that wire. Obviously, you want to inspect both of these. Assuming they look good, set them aside. Okay, now we can move along to removing the alternator. You're going to find 2 15mm headed bolts. There's one located right here towards the forward aspect of this, and then go ahead and follow it right along the back side, and you're going to find the second one. I'm going to start with the harder one to get to, right back here. Go ahead and fully remove this bolt. Let's move along to this one. Now at this point you want to be very careful not to let that alternator fall and potentially get damaged. Carefully grab onto the alternator. We're going to gently pry underneath this area to separate it from the vehicle. Set this aside. Now to continue removing the valve cover, what we're going to need to do is come right over to each of our coils. You're going to find the connector for it. You want to squeeze in the center, pull that off, inspect it, set it aside, do the same to all. So next we're going to start pulling the coils out of here. But before we go ahead and pull them out, grab onto something that you can mark each of these with. Now you can mark them 1, 2, 3, or you can mark them A, B, C, or whatever you want to do. But essentially we just want to remember exactly which cylinder each one of these coils came from, so when you go to reinstall them, they'll go exactly where they came from. So I'm just going to put a little A on here, B, C. Now we're going to start removing the mounting hardware that holds the coil down to the valve cover. On the 2 outer ones, you're going to find that they have these little bobbles that come up. So you're going to want to make sure they go back in the exact same position. To remove these, I'm just going to use a 10mm wrench. For this one, you can of course use a socket if you need to. Inspect your coils as you remove them. Set them aside. Now let's continue on to the wiring that's held down in these areas. Let's go ahead and pop those right off of there. All right, so now at this point, there's only going to be 8 mounting bolts that hold this valve cover down. But before I go ahead and remove this valve cover, I'm going to continue on and do the exact same thing to the rearward valve cover. Of course, we're going to disconnect all of our coils. We'll pull them right out of there after we mark them. Then we can disconnect all the wiring areas that it's mounted to the valve cover. And after that, we can continue on. Now this clip right here should be connected on the back side of the valve cover right here. It essentially just slides right in. Just go ahead and grab onto it, give it a little wiggle. It should want to break free. You don't necessarily need to disconnect this right here. We're just going to kind of set it aside. Now we're going to start removing our valve cover. We're going to start with the rearward one. That way there, once we get this out, we can bring it up and over the engine and we don't have to worry about any debris falling into the rest of the engine. To do this, we're going to use our 8mm and we're going to remove 8 mounting bolts. You're going to find 1 in each corner. Moving towards the center, there's going to be 2. Got the other one in the corner there. Back there, there's 1 in the corner. 1 here, you can see a little dimple. Another 1 in this dimple, and then all the way in that corner. Carefully lift this up. All right, we got that valve cover out of the way. Go ahead and do the exact same thing over here. Remove all 8 of your 8mm bolts and then go ahead and pull that valve cover right up and off. Okay, now that all of our mounting bolts are nice and loose, let's carefully grab onto this. I'm going to come right over to the oil fill, and I'm also going to carefully grab onto this breather. You want to be very careful not to go ahead and break this off. We just essentially want to grab onto it just as a reference point, give it a little wiggle, and start removing it from the vehicle. Set this aside. Okay, so now that we have both of the valve covers off of here, we have a nice clear look at what's going on underneath. You can see all the rockers and of course the valve springs and everything else. We're not going to worry about anything inside of here, but what we do need to pay attention to is the engine along the area where the gasket's supposed to be. The more you look at this, the more dirt you can see. We need to make sure it's clean and free of any of this debris. As we're cleaning it, you want to be very careful that nothing falls inside of the engine. This is super important. I'm going to use a flat razor blade and a nice clean rag, and we'll just start wiping everything down, cleaning it up the best we can. And then, of course, the process would be the exact same thing for the other side. All right, so at this point, I did the best I could to scrape it down so it's flat and even. The next thing I'm going to do is take a nice clean rag with some parts cleaner. Put some on that rag directly and then wipe this down. We're going to make sure it's free and clear of any debris and of course some oil that might be in the area. The next area that you want to pay attention to on each valve cover is the spark plug tubes. You have 3 of them for each. Just go ahead and wipe those down as well. Make sure that they don't have any debris up along this top area where the seal is supposed to ride. All right, so now that we have the engine cleaned up, the next thing that we're going to pay attention to is the valve covers themselves. Now the process is going to be pretty much the same for each of the valve covers, in exception of course, the forward one has the fill and it has this tube right here. The one for the rear only has this little breather tube right there. So with this one, I would just leave this hose on, but for this one right here, the forward one, just go ahead and take it, twist it a little bit, and pop it off. Inspect that. We'll set that aside. I always just remove this right here. Now we can set both of these aside, turn over the valve cover, and we'll start removing our gaskets. Now to start removing the gasket, let's start with a larger gasket. We'll come right along here, carefully get underneath it, gently pry it up, and separate it from the valve cover. Set this aside. Now the next thing that we're going to replace is the tube seals. The easiest way to remove these is by turning the valve cover over so it's right side up. And then we're just going to take a screwdriver or a punch, whatever you might happen to have, carefully get in between this area of the valve cover and the seal, and then we'll just give it a loving bonk. Lift it up. You can tell it popped right out of there. Do the same to all. Now at this point, this is completely stripped down. We're going to go ahead and spray it down with some parts cleaner to clean it off. All right, so now at this point, as you can tell, I completely cleaned down the entire inner area here. I cleaned down where my tube seals are supposed to go, and I cleaned down the entire area where the main valve cover seal is supposed to go. So now it's going to be time to insert our tube seals. Now looking at the new tube seals, what you're going to see is one side kind of has this curved in area, and then the other side, as you turn it around, does not. The side with the curved in area is the side that those tube seals for the spark plugs on the engine need to slide into. So those need to be facing towards the inner aspect of the valve cover. We'll just place this down on here. Now if you wanted to, you can gently try to press it in by hand. Sometimes they slide in, sometimes they don't. If it doesn't, you can just use a 34mm socket or something that you have that can place over this and press it down in and flat. Make sure it's flat. I'm going to get this side right here. Okay. Now we're just going to have a peek from the outside here. Make sure it looks like it's completely seated all the way around, and then do the exact same to all the rest. All right, now we can put on the main gasket. What you're going to want to pay attention to is on each of the gaskets, you're going to have this angled area. Make sure you have that matched up with the angled area on each of the valve covers. Let's go ahead and get this into position. Should just pretty much fall into place. Once everything's lined up, we'll fully press it in. All right. So at this point, it looks pretty good. I'm just going to go ahead and start pressing this in. Once it seems as though it's in just a little bit, we'll go ahead and turn this over so it's flat on the bench here, and we'll press it down the rest of the way. Turn it over, make sure it's completely secured all the way around, and then we can get this onto the engine. Now the next thing we're going to do to this, before we go ahead and bring this over to the engine, is to just take a tiny bit of lubricant and put it right along the tube seal here. We'll do the same to all of our tube seals. This is going to help make it so when we go to put the valve cover on, it should want to slide right over the tubes for those spark plugs. Alright, so now that we have all of our gaskets securely into the valve cover, we can go ahead and place this down and onto the engine. Once we get it on the engine, we're going to start in all of our mounting bolts. Once we've done that, we'll continue by snugging them up, starting from the center and working our way out. After that, we'll torque each of the bolts to 90 inch-pounds. Let's go ahead and slide this in here. I'm going to start with the driver's side. Bring it down. There we are. It's out of the way. Now we're going to start getting this down into position. Pay attention to all of your tube seals. Now we're just going to carefully press this down. You can see all the tubes going into their seals. This is nice and smooth. Before we go ahead and start snugging it up, just look all the way around the entire valve cover. Make sure you don't see any blue that looks like it's falling out of there. It's super important to make sure that the valve cover gasket is still sitting inside of the valve cover. Check all the way around, then continue on by bottoming out the bolts starting from the center. Now we can torque each of these bolts to 90 inch-pounds. All right, now if you want to double check them, it's your prerogative. All right, so this is nice and torqued down. Now you're going to do the exact same thing to the other valve cover. All right, so I've got both of my valve covers in and torqued. The next thing we're going to do is start pressing in our wiring here. Just press this right down. Do the same on both those valve covers. That center one's broken. Slide that in. Let's grab our coils. Let's put these back in order. Now we can put in our mounting hardware for this. The 2 forward bolts that had the studs on them are on either end. So we'll just go ahead and snug this up. Get this one. And then the center one's just a regular 10 millimeter. Now at this point, we'll bottom these out. Now we're going to torque our bolts to 71 inch-pounds. Now these right here, I'm not going to be able to torque because of course I can't get my socket over the little bobble. We'll just go ahead and make sure these are nice and tight so these can't move. Now we can plug these in. Listen for a click. Give it a tug. Make sure each of them is secure. Now you're just going to do the exact same thing for the back side here. Okay, let's get this wiring on the side of the valve cover here. Press that in. Now obviously you'd want to make sure that this is secured as well. Our piece broke off the back, so there isn't really much I can do with that, but essentially it should just go right back there. This right here is going to go up top, so we can leave all that just as it is. All right, now at this point I'm just going to go ahead and put the oil cap back on here. Generally, after you're done this job, you're going to want to make sure that you do an oil change. When you do an oil change, just make sure you use the proper oil. Now I'm going to put on my breather tube here. Should slide right in, make sure it's secure. Now what we're going to do is just take a nice flat razor blade and we're going to carefully go along all the areas on the engine where the gasket's supposed to be. As I'm scraping this, I'm trying to scrape out and away from each of these holes. Essentially, you just want to be very sure that nothing falls inside of any of these. After it's scraped, go ahead and wipe it down. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is get ready to mount our intake onto the engine. When we put it up on here, we're going to start in all of our mounting bolts up along here, but we're going to leave them nice and loose so we can still move the intake around a little bit. Once it's able to move around, we're going to come right back here with our 2 13mm headed bolts, and we'll start both of those into the back of the intake. Once both of those are started, we can go ahead and start snugging everything up. Carefully get this in here. We're going to lower this down. As we lower it down, you always want to be paying attention just to make sure you don't see any of that gasket fall out of the intake and potentially make its way out of position. Let's go ahead and slide it down. Now before I go ahead and put in any of my mounting bolts completely, of course we're going to pay attention, like I said, for any of that gasket. I'm just going to take a quick peek all the way around, everywhere I can see. Also, you just want to double check to make sure none of your wiring is stuck underneath there. Double check both sides. Now we can start starting in our bolts. Okay, all of these are started. I can still move this around. Let's do those back 2 bolts with a 13mm. Now at this point I can wiggle the intake around so I can get this bolt started in. So there's the driver's side one. I'll do the same to the passenger side one. After that, we're going to leave these loose, continue on to tightening up the top ones first, and then we'll snug up these rearward bolts. Both of our rear bolts are nice and loose, but they're in there. So now what we're going to do is come right up here. We can start snugging these up from the inside out. Now let's torque each of these to 220 inch-pounds. All right, now we can start plugging these in. Once you have it plugged in, you're going to go ahead and squeeze this red tab up to lock it in. Listen for that click, give it a tug to make sure it's secure, lock it in with the red tab. Do the same to the other. Click, give it a tug, lock it in, double check. Now before we can go ahead and put our alternator back inside the car, you're going to want to pay quick attention to a bushing that it has located on it. Now to mount this alternator onto the bracket, you're going to have a bolt that comes through from the forward side of it, and then it comes right through to this bushing and it screws directly into it. When that bolt tightens up, it's going to slide this bushing inward and it's going to press it directly up against the mounting inside the vehicle. So what we need to do is just take a hammer and a punch. We're going to carefully get in between this area and just try driving it down a tiny bit. What you're going to see is this area right here just come down. We don't need to push it all the way out, just enough so there's enough room for the bracket. Go ahead and slide the alternator down on here now. The first bolt we're going to start with for this is the longer bolt. This is going to be the pivot bolt. It's going to go right through the alternator, through this bracket, and then into that bushing that we just pushed in. Let's get this lined up, wiggle it around a little bit. Now we can do the rearward bolt. That started in there. Just got to get this in here. Now let's torque these to 31 foot-pounds. That's just the sound of the bushing placing up against the bracket. Now we can start hooking up the wires to our alternator. You want to make sure that the terminal end on this wire is nice and clean and free of any corrosion or debris. We'll slide it right on there. Take your 13mm nut. We'll bottom this out, and then you're going to torque this to 88 inch-pounds. You want to make sure you put on your protective cover. Make sure that's completely locked in so it can't fall off. We'll continue on to this wire. Slide it in, listen for a click. Give it a little tug, make sure it's secure, lock it in. Now we can start putting on our serpentine belt. We're only going to start putting it on up along the top here. We'll hang it down a little lower, get back inside the wheel well so we can finish off putting it on. Let's start sliding the serpentine belt in here. Just going to put it down and past the power steering pump here. That's this. Press it down past the idler, down past the tensioner down there as well. Now the next thing we're going to do is take this belt. We're going to loop it up and around the alternator here, bring it down and around the idler. And then we'll just push this all down so that we can reach it from the bottom. Now I have this slid down into place. The way I have it is right over the alternator here, and then I'm going to bring the forward aspect of the belt down and underneath this idler pulley, bring it around it, and then up and over the power steering pump. At this point, the rest of the belt is going to be located down at the bottom, which is where we're going to need to be. Let's get inside that wheel well. Okay, so from now inside the wheel well, we can see exactly how we have the belt situated. The forward aspect of it is going to come straight down along the front and then make its way underneath the AC compressor right here. If you were to look at where the rearward part of the belt came straight down, I brought it down along the front of the tensioner pulley and then right underneath it and then up and over the crank. At this point, it's sitting here waiting for me, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull this, turn it clockwise. That's going to relieve the tension, and then I'll slide it over the crank and into position. Regroup. Okay, so now that we have the belt onto all the pulleys, you just need to double check it real quick. What we're paying attention to is the ribbed areas on all of the pulleys. You want to make sure that the ribbed areas on the belt are fitting directly inside of them. If it seems like the belt is sitting off to one side or the other of any of the pulleys, you need to make sure that you go ahead and grab on that tensioner, relieve some tension, and then fully adjust it. Double check to make sure it's secure on all the pulleys properly. Now we can get our splash shield in here. When we put this up, we're going to put it up and behind the body right here so you can see our little tabs where the screws are going to go into. We'll just line those up with their corresponding holes in the body. Grab both of our mounting bolts, start them in. Once they're both started, snug them up. Now let's get in here. We're going to get all three of these pieces lined up. Grab our push clip. I'm going to reach from the back side. Try to hold all these in position. Slide that push clip through. Lock it in. All right, now at this point, we're going to go ahead and get the wheel back up on here. We'll start on all 5 of our lug nuts, snug them up, get the wheel back on the ground, and then torque it to 100 foot-pounds. With the wheel back on the ground, let's torque each of these lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. Now if you remove the other side wheel, make sure you put that on and torque it as well. All right, so now over on the driver's side of the engine, let's continue on to this rear breather hose here. Slide it right on. Make sure it's completely bottomed out up against this area. Now we can grab onto our EGR tube. We're going to slide it into the intake here, get our EGR in position, and tighten it up to the engine. Get this slid in there. We can take this. I'm going to grab my 2 bolts. We'll start those in there. Now at this point, we're going to leave these loose. We'll grab onto that EGR, put it in place. All right, now it's going to be time to start dealing with the EGR valve itself. Let's take that gasket. We're going to slide it in and behind the EGR valve, and then we're going to take both of our bolts, slide them through the EGR valve, and then through the holes that are in the gasket, essentially to hold the gasket in place. Put it up against the engine, start them into the engine, then snug them up. Please. There's that bolt. Let's see if I can get the same for the other one. All right. Both of our bolts are started in there. Let's put this up against the engine, line it up, start them in. Just going to use my 10mm socket, start these in. Go just a tiny bit for each one of them until we know that they're both started. Okay, they're both started. I'll go ahead and bottom these out. Let's plug this in. Listen for a click, give it a tug, make sure it's secure. Now let's bottom out both of these bolts. Let's torque each of these bolts to 45 inch-pounds. Get these lines back on as well. Make sure that's secure. Brake booster. Now we can start plugging in some more electrical connectors up here. Bring this one right over, slide it in. Listen for that click, give it a tug, make sure it's secure, lock it in. Do this one right here. Line it up. Press it in, listen for that click, give it a tug, lock it. Now let's secure this bracket. Make sure that's secure. Tighten the bottom bolt. Go ahead and put in that air filter. Now we can take our upper clamshell box for this. we're going to come right up here to where this connects onto the throttle body. Slide it on as far as it can go. Come right up top, tighten up that 8mm clamp. You can also use a flathead screwdriver. Make sure that's nice and tight. You don't want any dirty or unmetered air making its way inside. Make sure that this area is pressed in down along the back. Then make your way up towards the front. We're going to lock this in. There's one. There should be another one right here. Ours is missing, but go ahead and lock that in the same way. After that, we're going to go ahead and take our breather hose here. Slide that on. Let's get the air temp sensor reconnected. Okay, we're cruising along. The next thing that we're going to do is reconnect our negative battery terminal to the body. Let's take our single wire, make sure that the terminal end is free and clear of any corrosion or debris that might be on either side. Slide it right up against there. Now we're going to take our mounting nuts. I'm going to take the smaller of the two nuts. We'll start this on here, bottom it out. Make sure that's nice and tight. Now we can take our other battery wire, put that right on there. We'll use the larger of the two nuts. Tighten this one up as well. Double check, make sure they're both secure.